Have you ever wondered why, for the first time in human history, millions of people are consciously choosing not to have children? We're not just talking about economic difficulties or lack of time. There's something much deeper happening in our society's collective unconscious. Carl Jung, the revolutionary Swiss psychoanalyst, predicted this crisis decades before it exploded. In his studies of the human psyche, he unveiled hidden forces that shape our most intimate decisions, including the instinct to perpetuate our species. What Jung discovered will shock you. Our refusal to have children isn't a rational choice, but a psychological response to deep collective traumas we don't even realize we carry. In this video, you'll discover the disturbing truths Jung revealed about why our civilization is literally choosing to disappear. You'll uncover the unconscious patterns driving this unprecedented phenomenon and understand how our deepest fears are manifesting as a species-wide rejection of reproduction. Prepare to question everything you believed about family, purpose, and humanity's future. The answer may be more terrifying than you imagine. 1. The collective unconscious is screaming, "Stop!" Deep beneath our awareness lies something Jung called the collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of experiences that connects every human being on Earth. Think of it as humanity's hidden memory bank, storing not just our personal traumas, but the accumulated wounds of our entire species. Right now, this invisible force is sending out a desperate warning signal, and that signal is telling us to stop reproducing. Jung discovered that when civilizations face existential threats, the collective unconscious activates ancient survival mechanisms. These aren't conscious decisions. They happen automatically, like your body pulling your hand away from a hot stove before you even realize you're burned. Today, millions of people feel an inexplicable resistance to having children, and they can't understand why. They create logical explanations: money, career, freedom. But the real reason runs much deeper. The collective unconscious has detected something our rational minds haven't fully grasped yet. Our current way of life is unsustainable. It's picking up on the environmental destruction, the social collapse, the spiritual emptiness that surrounds us. Like animals that flee before an earthquake, our psyche is responding to danger signals that our conscious mind can't quite detect. This ancient warning system evolved over millions of years to protect our species. When food becomes scarce, when predators multiply, when the environment becomes hostile, reproduction naturally decreases. But what we're experiencing now is different. We're not facing physical starvation. We're facing something Jung called spiritual starvation. Our souls are malnourished, and the collective unconscious knows that bringing children into this spiritual wasteland would be cruel. The modern world has created conditions that are toxic to human flourishing. We're more connected than ever through technology, yet more isolated than ever in our hearts. We have more information than any generation in history, yet less wisdom. We have more entertainment options, yet deeper boredom. We have more comfort, yet greater anxiety. The collective unconscious recognizes this paradox and responds with a profound reluctance to create new life. Jung understood that the psyche doesn't lie to us. It simply reveals truths we're not ready to face consciously. When couples today say they're not ready for children, they might be tapping into this deeper knowing. Their unconscious minds are aware that something fundamental is broken in our society, something that makes the prospect of nurturing healthy, whole human beings seem nearly impossible. This isn't about being pessimistic. It's about recognizing that our deepest self has the wisdom to protect future generations from inheriting a world that's lost its way. The collective unconscious isn't trying to end humanity. It's trying to save it by forcing us to pause, reflect, and heal what's broken before we continue the cycle. The question isn't why people don't want children anymore. The question is, What has gone so wrong with our civilization that our own unconscious is telling us to stop reproducing? And more importantly, what can we do to heal these deep wounds so that the desire for life and creation can return naturally, as it should? 2. The shadow of modern parenthood. Every person carries what Jung called a shadow, the parts of ourselves we don't want to see or admit exist. But parenthood in today's world has developed its own collective shadow, and it's terrifying enough to make people run in the opposite direction. The shadow of modern parenting is filled with images that previous generations never had to face. Today's potential parents don't just worry about providing food and shelter, they worry about school shootings, cyberbullying, social media addiction, climate catastrophe, and raising children in a world that seems to be falling apart at the seams. These fears live in the shadow because they're too overwhelming to face directly. Jung taught us that whatever we refuse to acknowledge in our shadow doesn't disappear. It grows stronger and influences our behavior in hidden ways. The modern parenting shadow is packed with guilt, fear, and shame that society pretends doesn't exist. We're told that having children is natural and fulfilling, but the shadow whispers about lost dreams, financial ruin, relationship destruction, and the crushing weight of responsibility in an uncertain world. Previous generations had their own struggles, but they also had something we've lost: community support and clear social structures. A mother in the past wasn't expected to be everything to her child: teacher, entertainer, therapist, coach, and friend. The village helped raise children, extended families lived together, and everyone knew their role. Today's parents face the impossible expectation of being perfect while doing it all alone. The shadow also contains the unspoken truth about modern childhood itself. We're raising children in concrete jungles, surrounded by screens, disconnected from nature, and pressured to excel in a system that values performance over well-being. Deep down, many potential parents sense that they would be bringing children into a kind of prison, even if it's a comfortable one. Social media has made the shadow even darker by creating the illusion that everyone else has perfect families while hiding the real struggles. The contrast between the glossy images of family life online and the messy, exhausting reality creates a cognitive dissonance that feeds the shadow. People see the highlight reel of parenthood, but feel the weight of its hidden costs. The economic shadow is particularly heavy. Unlike previous generations who could support families on single incomes, today's parents often need multiple jobs just to afford basic necessities. The shadow knows that children have become expensive investments rather than natural expressions of love and hope. This transforms the sacred act of creating life into a business calculation, poisoning the well of natural desire. Perhaps most disturbing is the shadow's awareness of what Jung called the unlived life of the parents. Many adults today feel they haven't fully lived their own lives, haven't discovered who they truly are, haven't healed their own childhood wounds. The shadow knows that hurt people, and it recoils from the prospect of passing unhealed trauma to another generation. The technological shadow looms large too. Children today face addictions, mental health crises, and developmental challenges that didn't exist before. The shadow recognizes that we're conducting a massive experiment on developing brains with devices and platforms we don't fully understand. It asks, how can we protect children from dangers we can't even comprehend ourselves? Until we're willing to face this shadow directly, to acknowledge the very real fears and challenges of modern parenthood, the unconscious will continue to protect us by dampening our desire for children. The shadow isn't our enemy. It's trying to prevent us from repeating patterns that cause suffering. But we can't heal what we won't face. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper and integrate your shadows and light, check out the SIM Method ebook. It's a concise guide that can help you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. 3. The inferiority complex disguised as freedom. Jung discovered that many of our loudest declarations of strength actually hide our deepest feelings of weakness. Today, when people proudly announce they're child-free by choice, they're often covering up what Jung would recognize as a massive inferiority complex that's taken over an entire generation. This isn't about judging anyone's choices. It's about understanding the hidden psychology behind them. Jung taught us that when we feel inadequate to handle life's biggest challenges, we often flip the script and pretend we don't want those challenges anyway. It's like someone who's afraid of swimming, declaring that pools are stupid and they prefer being dry. The inferiority complex around parenting runs deep in modern society. We've created a world so complicated, so demanding, so overwhelming that many people genuinely believe they're not capable of raising healthy children. But instead of admitting this fear, which would feel too vulnerable, they reframe their inadequacy as superior wisdom. Listen to how people talk about being child-free today. They don't just say they don't want kids. They explain in great detail why having children is irresponsible, selfish, or outdated. They create elaborate philosophies about how they're saving the planet, pursuing higher purposes, or living more authentic lives. This need to justify and over-explain reveals the underlying insecurity Jung would immediately recognize. The modern world has indeed become incredibly complex. Previous generations learned parenting skills naturally through extended families and tight communities. Today's potential parents feel lost, incompetent, and unprepared. They see the demands of modern parenting, the endless activities, academic pressure, digital dangers, emotional labor, and their unconscious mind says, "I can't handle this." But their ego can't accept feeling inadequate. So it transforms this fear into a choice. Social media makes this complex worse by showing us only the perfect moments of other people's lives while hiding the struggles. People compare their inner chaos to everyone else's curated highlights and conclude they're not parent material. The inferiority complex whispers, "Look how together everyone else is. You could never measure up. Better to opt out entirely." The economic pressure feeds this complex too. When basic survival requires both parents to work multiple jobs, when housing costs consume most of people's income, when healthcare is a luxury, the unconscious absorbs the message that we're failing at the most basic human task of creating stable environments for children. Rather than acknowledge this systemic failure, individuals internalize it as personal inadequacy. Career culture has weaponized this complex brilliantly. It tells people that their worth comes from professional achievement and that children would interfere with their real purpose. But Jung understood that when we define ourselves entirely through external accomplishments, we're usually compensating for feeling worthless inside. The person who says they're too focused on their career for kids might really be saying, "I only feel valuable when I'm producing something measurable." The inferiority complex also shows up in how people talk about the skills required for parenting. They act as if raising children requires advanced degrees and perfect emotional health. Previous generations didn't agonize over whether they were qualified to be parents. They just did it and learned along the way. Today's potential parents have convinced themselves that anything less than perfection would damage their children, so they choose not to try at all. Technology has created new layers of inadequacy. Parents today feel responsible for protecting their children from digital dangers they don't understand, while also ensuring they're not left behind technologically. The complexity feels overwhelming, and the inferiority complex says it's better to avoid the challenge entirely than risk failing at it. The therapeutic culture, while valuable in many ways, has also contributed to this complex. People have become hyper-aware of how their own childhood experiences affected them, and they're terrified of making similar mistakes with their own children. The inferiority complex convinces them that their personal healing journey isn't complete enough to take on the responsibility of shaping another human being. What makes this particularly tragic is that Jung believed the journey of parenthood itself was one of the most powerful paths to personal growth and healing. By avoiding it out of feelings of inadequacy, people deny themselves one of life's greatest opportunities for transformation. They stay stuck in their inferiority complex instead of growing through it. The freedom narrative becomes a prison when it's built on fear rather than genuine choice. True freedom would include the option to embrace life's greatest challenges, including the messy, imperfect, incredibly rewarding journey of raising children. But the inferiority complex has convinced an entire generation that they're not worthy of this adventure, so they dress up their fear as enlightened choice and miss out on one of humanity's most profound experiences. 4. When ego replaces natural instinct. Jung understood that humans possess deep, natural instincts that have guided our species for millions of years. But something unprecedented has happened in modern society. Our inflated egos have begun to override these ancient wisdoms, particularly the instinct to create and nurture new life. The ego, in Jung's understanding, is the conscious mind's sense of self, how we see ourselves and want others to see us. When healthy, the ego works in harmony with our deeper instincts. But when the ego becomes inflated, it starts to believe it knows better than millions of years of human evolution. Today's ego has decided that having children is beneath it, outdated, or simply inconvenient to its grand plans. This isn't about intelligence or education making people wiser about reproduction. It's about the ego becoming so dominant that it drowns out the quiet voice of natural instinct. Like a loud radio that prevents you from hearing someone speaking softly nearby, the ego's constant chatter about career goals, personal freedom, and lifestyle choices makes it impossible to hear what our deeper nature is trying to tell us. The modern ego has been fed a steady diet of messages that reinforce its importance above all else. Self-help culture tells us to follow our dreams and put ourselves first. Consumer culture promises that we can buy our way to happiness and fulfillment. Social media rewards us for presenting perfect versions of ourselves. All of this inflates the ego until it believes that its immediate desires are more important than the continuation of human life itself. Natural instinct operates differently than ego-driven thinking. Instincts are quiet, subtle, and often feel irrational to our logical minds. The maternal instinct doesn't present itself as a business plan with costs and benefits. It shows up as a gentle pull toward nurturing, a softening when seeing babies, a mysterious sense of incompleteness that can't be filled by achievements or possessions. But the ego dismisses these feelings as primitive or irrelevant. The inflated ego particularly rebels against the vulnerability that comes with having children. Parenthood strips away many of our ego defenses. We can't control everything. We make mistakes. We feel helpless sometimes. We sacrifice our image of ourselves as independent and self-sufficient. The ego hates this loss of control and creates elaborate reasons why children would interfere with our self-actualization. Jung observed that when people become too identified with their ego achievements, their job titles, social status, educational credentials, or lifestyle choices, they lose touch with their deeper nature. The person who defines themselves entirely as a successful professional or world traveler or artist has created such a narrow identity that anything threatening it feels like death. Having children threatens these ego identities because it demands we become something larger and more complex than our carefully crafted self-image. The ego also resists the timeline that children impose on life. Natural instinct understands that there are seasons to human existence, times for learning, times for exploring, times for creating new life, times for nurturing and guiding others. But the ego wants to stay young and free forever. It refuses to accept that maybe the exploring phase should naturally transition into the creating phase, and then into the wisdom-sharing phase. Modern technology has given the ego new weapons against instinct. We can now prevent pregnancy so effectively that the ego can override natural cycles indefinitely. We can create lives so full of stimulation and achievement that the quiet call of instinct gets completely buried. We can even convince ourselves that not following our instincts makes us more evolved than our ancestors. The tragedy is that Jung believed our instincts contain profound wisdom about what actually makes life meaningful. The parenting instinct isn't just about continuing the species. It's about experiencing unconditional love, learning selflessness, connecting with the eternal cycle of life and death, and discovering strengths we never knew we had. When the ego blocks this experience, it deprives us of some of life's deepest teachings. Perhaps most sadly, the ego's victory over instinct creates people who achieve everything they thought they wanted, but still feel empty inside. They have the career, the freedom, the lifestyle, the achievements, but something essential is missing. Jung would say this is because they've cut themselves off from their natural role in the great cycle of human existence. They've won the ego game but lost something much more precious: their connection to the timeless rhythms that give life its deepest meaning. 5. The symbolic death of family in the digital age. Jung understood that symbols carry immense power in shaping human behavior. They're not just pictures or ideas, they're living forces that influence our deepest desires and fears. In our digital age, we're witnessing something that would have horrified Jung: the systematic destruction of family as a sacred symbol and its replacement with images that make family life appear outdated, restrictive, and undesirable. Every day, millions of people consume digital content that portrays family life as a burden rather than a blessing. Television shows mock married couples as boring and unfulfilled. Movies celebrate the single life as adventurous while showing parents as stressed, tired, and trapped. Social media algorithms feed us content about toxic families and child-free happiness while burying stories of family joy and connection. These aren't just entertainment choices. They're rewiring our unconscious minds to reject one of humanity's most fundamental symbols. The digital world has created alternative symbols that compete directly with family. The successful entrepreneur symbol promises unlimited growth and achievement. The world traveler symbol offers adventure and freedom. The influencer symbol provides attention and admiration. These new symbols feel more appealing than the parent symbol, which gets associated with sacrifice, limitation, and loss of identity. But Jung would recognize what's really happening here. We're trading symbols that connect us to eternal human experiences for symbols that serve corporate interests. The family symbol has guided human civilization for thousands of years because it represents something sacred: the continuation of life, the passing down of wisdom, the experience of unconditional love. The new digital symbols are hollow by comparison, designed to keep us consuming products and content rather than creating meaning through relationships. The speed of digital life has also corrupted our ability to understand family's true nature. Family relationships develop slowly, require patience, and offer rewards that can't be photographed or posted. In a world where everything happens instantly and gets measured by likes and shares, family experiences seem boring and irrelevant. The digital mind wants immediate gratification, but family life operates on a completely different timeline that spans decades and generations. Digital communication has replaced the deep, messy intimacy that families provide. People now get their emotional needs met through online connections that can be controlled, edited, and ended with a click. Why deal with a crying baby or a difficult teenager when you can get validation from followers who only see your best moments? The digital world offers the illusion of connection without the challenging growth that real relationships demand. The symbolic power of digital success has also inflated beyond all reason. People now measure their worth by followers, likes, career achievements and lifestyle choices, rather than by their relationships and contributions to future generations. The digital symbol of living your best life usually means living only for yourself, which directly contradicts the family symbol of living for something larger than yourself. Jung would also notice how digital platforms profit from keeping people disconnected from family life. A person scrolling through their phone generates revenue. A person playing with their children or talking with their spouse does not. The economic incentives of the digital world actively work against family formation because families are less profitable than isolated individuals seeking digital stimulation. The pornography epidemic has corrupted the symbolic meaning of intimacy itself. Sex, which once symbolized the sacred creation of new life within committed relationships, now symbolizes recreational pleasure disconnected from any deeper meaning. When intimacy loses its connection to family creation, it becomes just another form of entertainment rather than a gateway to life's greatest adventures. Dating apps have turned relationships into a shopping experience where people are constantly looking for someone better rather than committing to growing with one person. The symbol of choice has become more powerful than the symbol of commitment. Even though Jung understood that real growth only happens through deep, long-term connections that survive difficulties, even the physical spaces where families once gathered have been invaded by screens. Dinner tables are surrounded by people staring at devices instead of each other. Living rooms are arranged around televisions instead of conversation areas. Bedrooms have become entertainment centers instead of intimate sanctuaries. The symbolic power of family spaces has been weakened by digital distractions. The most tragic part is that people don't realize they're losing something precious. They think they're gaining freedom and opportunities, but they're actually trading the symbol that connects them to life's deepest meanings for symbols that ultimately leave them empty and searching for something they can't name. Jung would say we're watching an entire civilization forget what it means to be human. 6. The ancestral fear of creating in a sick civilization. Deep in our bones, we carry the memories of our ancestors, not just their genetics, but their fears, their wisdom, their understanding of when life flourishes and when it struggles. Jung called this ancestral knowledge, and right now it's sending out warning signals that our civilization has become too sick to safely nurture new life. This isn't conscious knowledge. Most people can't explain why they feel hesitant about bringing children into the world. They just sense something is wrong. But their ancestral memory recognizes the signs of a civilization in decline, and it responds the same way it has for thousands of years, by reducing reproduction until conditions improve. Our ancestors survived ice ages, plagues, famines, and wars by developing an incredible sensitivity to environmental conditions. They could sense when times were good for creating new life and when it was better to wait. This survival mechanism is still active in our unconscious minds, and it's picking up on things our rational minds prefer to ignore. The ancestral memory recognizes that we're living in a time of spiritual famine. Our ancestors understood that children need more than food and shelter. They need connection to something sacred, meaningful work to prepare for, and elders who can pass down wisdom about how to live well. Today's civilization offers none of these things in any reliable way. Look at what we're asking children to inherit: a planet with damaged ecosystems, economies that require endless growth on finite resources, social systems that prioritize profit over people, and communities where neighbors don't know each other's names. The ancestral memory sees this and asks, what kind of parents would subject their children to such conditions? The fear isn't just about external conditions, it's about our internal readiness to guide young people through life's challenges. Our ancestors lived in cultures where adults had clear roles, proven wisdom, and strong connections to their communities. They knew how to teach children practical skills, moral values, and spiritual understanding because they had received these teachings themselves. Today's potential parents often feel like children themselves, still trying to figure out how to navigate a rapidly changing world. They lack the deep roots in tradition and community that gave previous generations confidence in their ability to raise healthy children. The ancestral memory recognizes this unpreparedness and hesitates to create new life that would be guided by such uncertain hands. The speed of change itself triggers ancestral fears. Our DNA was shaped by thousands of years of relatively stable conditions where survival strategies could be passed down through generations. But today's children will face challenges we can't even imagine, using technologies that don't exist yet, in a world that's transforming faster than human adaptation can keep up with. Mental illness, addiction, and suicide rates among young people have exploded in recent decades. The ancestral memory sees these statistics and recognizes them as signs that something fundamental is broken in how we're raising children. Why would it encourage more reproduction when the evidence suggests we're creating suffering rather than flourishing? The breakdown of extended families particularly troubles the ancestral memory. For most of human history, children were raised by entire communities of relatives who shared knowledge, resources, and responsibility. Today's nuclear families try to do alone what once required villages, and the strain shows in parents who are overwhelmed and children who lack the rich web of relationships they need to thrive. Even our food has become disconnected from natural cycles and local communities. Our ancestors ate what grew around them, in season, prepared by people they knew. Today's children eat processed foods created by corporations, often containing chemicals that didn't exist until recently. The ancestral memory questions whether bodies adapted to natural foods can properly develop on such artificial diets. The digital environment particularly alarms our ancestral wisdom. Children now spend more time interacting with screens than with nature or even other people. Their brains are developing in ways no previous generation has experienced, and we won't know the full consequences for decades. The ancestral memory sees this massive experiment on developing minds and recoils from subjecting new children to such risks. Perhaps most disturbing to ancestral wisdom is the loss of meaningful rituals and ceremonies that once helped children understand their place in the larger story of human existence. Without initiation rites, coming-of-age ceremonies, or clear transitions from childhood to adulthood, young people drift without purpose or direction. The ancestral memory recognizes that we've lost the cultural knowledge needed to help children become healthy adults. This ancestral fear isn't trying to end humanity. It's trying to protect future generations from inheriting a broken world. It's hoping that by reducing reproduction temporarily, we'll be forced to address the fundamental problems that make our civilization unsuitable for raising healthy children. 7. Projecting inner chaos onto the outer world. Jung made one of his most profound discoveries when he realized that we don't see the world as it really is. We see it filtered through our own inner state. When our internal world is chaotic, fearful, and fragmented, we project that chaos onto everything around us, including our vision of what it would mean to bring children into existence. This projection happens completely unconsciously. People today look at the world and see nothing but problems: climate change, political division, economic uncertainty, social breakdown. But Jung would ask, are these external conditions really worse than what humans have faced throughout history? Or are we seeing the world through the lens of our own inner turmoil? Previous generations lived through world wars, plagues, economic depressions, and countless other disasters, yet they continued having children with hope and determination. The difference wasn't that their external conditions were better, it's that their internal world was more stable. They had stronger connections to family, community, spiritual beliefs, and cultural traditions that gave them resilience and hope. Today's adults often carry unhealed childhood wounds that make the world seem more dangerous than it actually is. Someone who grew up feeling unsafe, unloved, or unsupported unconsciously assumes that children today will face the same emotional dangers. They project their inner fear onto external conditions, convincing themselves that the world is too terrible for children, when really they're afraid of recreating their own painful experiences. The therapy culture, while helpful in many ways, has also created a generation hyper-focused on trauma and damage. People spend years analyzing everything that went wrong in their childhoods, becoming experts in recognizing dysfunction and danger. This internal focus on problems gets projected outward, making them see the world as fundamentally broken and unsuitable for new life. Social media amplifies this projection by feeding us a constant stream of negative news, crisis stories, and doom predictions. Our ancestors might have heard about disasters in distant places weeks or months later, if at all. Today, we're bombarded with every tragedy, conflict, and problem happening anywhere in the world, in real time. Our nervous systems weren't designed to process this much fear-inducing information, and we end up projecting our overwhelmed state onto reality itself. The inner chaos also comes from lack of clear purpose and meaning in life. When people feel lost, directionless, and disconnected from anything sacred or eternal, they unconsciously assume that life itself has no deeper meaning. They project their inner emptiness onto existence and conclude that bringing new consciousness into such a meaningless reality would be cruel. Jung understood that our relationship with death deeply affects our relationship with life. Modern culture tries to hide death, avoid aging, and pretend that we can control everything. This creates enormous inner anxiety because we're fighting against natural cycles we can't actually escape. People project this death anxiety onto having children, imagining all the ways their children might suffer or die, rather than focusing on how they might live and flourish. The economic fears are often projections too. While money is certainly a real concern, the terror many people feel about the costs of children often comes from deeper fears about their own worth and capabilities. Someone who doesn't feel valuable or competent unconsciously assumes they won't be able to provide for children, even when their actual financial situation might be perfectly adequate. Climate anxiety has become a particularly powerful projection screen. While environmental challenges are real, the apocalyptic fear many people feel often reflects their inner sense of hopelessness more than actual scientific predictions. They project their personal despair onto the planet's future, imagining scenarios so terrible that having children seems like child abuse. The projection also works in reverse. People who are afraid of their own capacity for selfishness, anger, or inadequacy project these qualities onto potential children. They imagine their children will be burdens, problems, or sources of misery because they haven't made peace with the difficult parts of their own nature. Instead of seeing children as opportunities for growth and love, they see them as threats to their fragile sense of control. Political division feeds these projections powerfully. When people are convinced that half the population is dangerous or evil, they naturally fear bringing children into a world surrounded by enemies. But this political fear often reflects inner division. People who haven't integrated their own shadow, their own capacity for both good and evil, project this split onto society and see the world as fundamentally unsafe. The most tragic projection is the assumption that suffering should be avoided at all costs. People project their own inability to handle life's difficulties onto hypothetical children, assuming that any challenge or pain their children might face would be unbearable. They forget that growth, meaning, and joy often come through overcoming difficulties, not avoiding them. Jung would say that until we clean up our inner world, healing our wounds, finding our purpose, making peace with life's difficulties, and reconnecting with sources of meaning and hope, we'll continue projecting our chaos onto external reality and missing the profound gifts that creating and nurturing new life can offer both to ourselves and to the world. So here we stand at a crossroads that Jung himself might have called the most crucial moment in human psychological evolution. We've uncovered the hidden forces driving our civilization away from its most fundamental purpose, the creation and nurturing of new life. But awareness is only the beginning. The real question isn't whether Jung was right about these unconscious patterns controlling our choices. The question is, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Will you continue letting ancient fears and collective wounds dictate your deepest life decisions? Or will you begin the courageous work of healing what's broken, both within yourself and in the world around you? Because ultimately the future of human consciousness itself may depend not on whether people have children, but on whether they make that choice from a place of authentic wholeness rather than unconscious fear. The children who need to be born aren't just any children. They're the ones who will come through parents conscious enough to raise them well. Are you ready to become that kind of person?